Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Lots of big news on this video. First off, I sold a manuscript, the thing that I've been trying to do for, literal decades at this point. So more on that in a minute. I also finished watching Captain America Brave New World with my son. I'll have some thoughts on that. And then in other massive big news developments, we dropped a whole bunch of explosives in Iran, and Oklahoma City won its first NBA championship. If you're somehow new to this channel, I'm just a trucker who also happens to be an author and an illustrator, but I make my bread and butter by driving a semi-truck, and I work on the night shift, and that's where I'm headed right now. I do these videos in the car, and well, let's talk about it. You can find my books on Amazon, link in the description below. All right, so the big news, the book that I sold. It's a middle grade contemporary fantasy. It's called Fossil Force. I sold it as a standalone with sequel potential. I think they're going to let me keep the ending in that I wanted that will really seg into the following books. We'll just have to see. Oh, excuse me here. But I'm really stoked about that one. So over the years, with all of the other writers that I've known and the writing circles that I've been in and the protesters that I've run over and all of the feedback that I've gotten to give on other amateur writers' manuscripts, you tend to notice what a writer's blind spots are. And when you've got a writer who writes fantasy for children and they run it by their own children, and my daughter said that it was better than Harry Potter or whatever, like, you need to understand when your kids just love you. And you also need to understand what your blind spots are with regard to your own work. If your kids tell you that you suck and they don't want to read your book, then maybe you got other stuff going on at home, right? But for me, I ended up in this scenario where I wrote this book with this particular publisher in mind, and then I read it to my kids along the way. And since they're kind of the target audience, they really got a big kick out of it. And I took that for what it was worth. Hey, my boys like that Dad writes books. But I sent it off in February, and over the next several months, my son would randomly ask me details about the book. How did this work? Or my favorite part was this happening. I was like, that's cool. He was dialed in on it, and that was different. If I had just read something to him, whether it was a book I wrote or a book that that I enjoyed and that I wanted to share with him, that would be different. And he doesn't always lock in on those. I'll occasionally read him something from another published author, and he'll just be like, okay, whatever. But the fact that it hung with him, said something to me. And so I like my chances there. I still try to hold on to that blind spot and just be like, okay, he's still your son and he loves you, and maybe he's gassing you up a little bit, but he's also, I don't know, he's not wired that way. So if he didn't like it, I think he would tell me. But we'll see. I guess the real litmus test will be once it gets published and it gets sent out to the publisher's email list and all the grandmas buy it for their grandsons, and if there's high demand and good feedback, then maybe I'll have something. It remains to be seen, but I'm stoked for this. So enough about that. As far as Captain America goes, I would probably rate that movie 2.5 or 3 out of 5. I thought it was okay, bordering on fine. There was a lot that I liked about it. There was plenty that I didn't. And well, let's just list that out. So the action scenes were really cool. They always do a good job of nailing those. There are 3 main ones. There's one at the beginning where Captain Falcon is out there busting up this terrorist group, this mercenary group called Serpent. They stole something and he's trying to get it back. There's one in the middle where America and Japan have their navies in the Indian Ocean, and something goes wrong and a couple of rogue fighter pilots start shooting at each other, and Cap and also Falcon number 2, Joaquin, they go up there to mitigate that. That was done really well. And then the big final fight scene between Cap and Red Hulk, again, was exciting. There's the principle that I've discussed before. I called it Boba Fett on a Rancor, where you got to have story and characters and spectacle, and oftentimes these big studios just go for the spectacle. But these movies do a lot better when the story and the character can prop up the spectacle and make it mean something. Otherwise, it's just Boba Fett riding a Rancor, and it looks cool, but it's kind of pointless. They at least made an effort on the story and the characters. It didn't land all that well, and this is something that runs throughout the entire movie. The script felt kind of raw and kind of rushed. I heard that there were rewrites and reshoots and stuff, and they made judicious use of the strike delays and stuff to kind of get it dialed in. It just felt like, okay, we've got an idea and we've also got a deadline, so let's just shoot this and we'll try to salvage it in the editing room. It could have used some more time to percolate and to marinate. The general thrust of it is that General Thunderbolt Ross is now the president. America and Japan are trying to figure out basically like mining rights for Celestial Island. That's something that popped up at the end of the Eternals movie, because there's this giant island now in the middle of the Indian Ocean where they have discovered adamantium, and they don't want to do what Wakanda did and just have one country hog it. They want to use this resource kind of equally so that everybody's got it, and it will hopefully limit the options of going to war, especially on a lopsided basis in the future. But somebody keeps messing with President Ross's attempts to make this treaty happen, and you come to find out that it's a character from the 2008 Hulk movie, Samuel Stearns. In the comics, his villain name was The Leader, not the best name, but they use him pretty well. He's pulling the strings. He's a genius think tank probability engine, and he's pulling strings in the periphery and basically trying to screw Ross over for keeping him imprisoned and making him do science at gunpoint for 16 years. And so Cap has to duke it out with Stearns and try to mitigate problems with Ross, and a couple of his friends get caught in the crossfire. Isaiah Bradley gets arrested for something that he did while he was under mind control, and Falcon gets blown up during the scuffle in the Indian Ocean. So there's just all that stuff going on. Like there's pressure piling on him, and he's continually asking himself, Sam Wilson is like, man, am I up to snuff to do this? Should I have taken the super soldier serum? Would that have made a difference in what I'm able to do, whether I can handle all this stuff? And ultimately he succeeds and he saves the day, and that's that. There were a couple of character moments that could have been better. There was like one scene with Liv Tyler in it playing Ross's daughter. I think that dynamic could have been written better. There was an assistant that Ross had. The character's name is Layla Taylor. In the comics, she and Sam Wilson are romantically linked. In this one, like, she didn't really have a whole lot to do. She was just there. There's also an ex-widow named Ruth Bott Seraph, who she's in charge of Ross's security detail. I thought the actress that they picked to play her was kind of a miss. Like, you bring in an actress like Scarlett Johansson and Florence Pugh, and you're already asking the audience to suspend disbelief by having them beat up like a 250-pound guy. This chick weighs 100 pounds soaking wet, and that was a pretty big ask. But she wasn't doing so much like super hard combat, beating up dudes. Like, there was more gunplay and whatnot. Like, it was just visually, it was like, okay, this is kind of a big ask. But anyway, I think what it all comes down to, like the biggest, most glaring thing, if I was trying to narrow it down to one thing, is that behind the scenes, the studio was really trying to crowbar and almost have an argument with the audience over the fact that Sam Wilson is Captain America. Like, they know that the dedicated comic book movie audience is really hung up on that. And they were trying to force it too hard in the other direction, and they made it really too obvious that they wanted everybody to say Sam Wilson is Captain America. I think they should have treated Wilson more the way that they treated Steve Rogers in the other Marvel movies. Just say Captain Rogers, Captain Rogers, Captain Rogers. And the only time anybody really said Captain America was when it was the news kind of talking about him in the abstract, or when it was Scott Lang fanboying over Captain America. But in this one, it was almost like two-dimensional villain type stuff when Samuel Stearns is like, "You'll never stop me, Captain America." Rah! I think if they had treated him the same way that they treated Rogers and just called him Captain Wilson, and he puts on the shield, and instead of him walking around like, "Yo, I'm Captain America," like, treat it the way that they treated the last guy to have it, and people will be a little bit more on board with him being the next guy. But when you've got Wilson and Torres flying around in the Pacific, engaging with the American pilots and the Japanese pilots, have the Japanese pilots say like, "Oh, the Americans are firing on us, and they've deployed Captain America." Like, then there's this understanding that the powers that be accept Sam Wilson as Captain America, but they see that he is in fact still Sam Wilson. Like, it just felt like it was something that they were trying to push a little bit too hard. And that's something that can be said of most other developments in the script. Most of the time when Ross was on screen, he was mumbling to himself about, "Oh, I've got to make this treaty work. Oh, my daughter doesn't think I've changed. Oh, I need to talk to Betty." It was just stuff that was there to remind the viewer, because that's what the screenwriter needed to pretty much remind the director to say, like, "Hey, make sure you emphasize this point." Those are wrinkles that can get ironed out in the rewriting phase or in between drafts when the script has had some time to breathe. And like, in addition to, like I said, the studio really wanting to drive this home and kind of win the argument with the fans, like, "No, Sam Wilson is Captain America," like, they were also just trying to rush it, and it could have done better if it had a little bit more time and some more feedback in the beta phase. But overall, like, it's more of a sequel to the 2008 Hulk movie than it is to any of the Captain America or Avengers movies. But I think it'll serve well as kind of a bridge to whatever it is that they're going to do next. There was a post-credit scene where, like, effectively they tease the upcoming Fantastic Four movie with hints of multiverse stuff, which is, I guess, is what the next couple Avengers movies are going to deal with. I've missed a handful of the shows and a couple of the other movies. I am not super locked in on the overall story, but I gathered enough of what I needed from osmosis to get what was going on with the peripheral stuff in this one. It was fine. The action was cool. I like Anthony Mackie. Harrison Ford is always great for chewing up the scenery. And I think maybe Disney/Marvel is through the worst of their hiccups with this property and with the studio in general, and hopefully they're able to learn from those mistakes by not repeating them and make good steps going forward. I don't know. We'll see. I don't care all that much about the financial side of it. In general, I want good stuff again. And hopefully we continue to get more of it. That F1 movie comes out this weekend. I'm definitely going to sneak out and see that. And then my kids keep bugging me to take them to see Jurassic World. We saw like 6 trailers for that during the NBA game tonight. So yeah, I was reminded that it exists, and I'm interested to see it. It's just my kids were like, "Oh, Dad, we're going to see that?" I was like, "Yes, you asked me at the last commercial break." I said, "Yes, we'll take you to see it." Anyway, I'm at work now. It is midnight. Y'all drive safe. See you out there, and get ready to buy my book. I'm going to spam the living daylights out of that as it comes. Drive safe, as I already said.